Happy Thursday, socialites, and welcome to the 42 Social Club, the best damn social club in the universe. I am your guest, Jedi ASU. Welcome for joining the show and being part of this. I know it is an interesting run of events, and we have a very special guest, a family member from the conference. Alicia de Artola, and she's going to actually give us a view from the USC side. So I'm actually very excited for this. So, as always, make sure you pour yourself a drink, kick back, relax, and let's get social. Lisa, you are live. Welcome to the 42 Social Club. Thank you so much for being part of the show this week.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And it's awesome to put like a face and a voice to one of my favorite Pac-12 Twitter accounts.
Thank
So
you. Well, as
something.
thank you very much. I appreciate the kind words, and for you as well. I've been following you for a while. I've always loved your writing. I know that's given during football season. There's always a back and forth, but I just absolutely love how you write the information you put out there. So again, I thank you for everything you do as well.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate that one.
Absolutely. And so I know we were pre-gaming and we were talking about you are in the Phoenix area today. I know we were talking you were saying you were driving in, so hopefully the heat isn't too oppressive at this hour.
Oppressive is the word. I am very, very, very grateful for air conditioning, as I'm sure everyone in this area is. I've been reflecting all week about what did how did people live here before air conditioning?
Right.
I saw a guy running today. Uh, it was like 105 out, and the dude's running down the street, and I just thought there are some crazy people in this planet. But more power to them. More power to all you you Arizona people who uh, put up with this heat.
Exactly. One of the writers, Jeff Metcalf, you've probably seen his name retweeted sometimes. It's like I had him on the show one time, and it was about 10 o'clock, and he's like, "Okay, I'm going to go for a run because it's less than 105." I'm like, "Go, Jeff." Go, Jeff.
Yeah.
God. But excellent. But again, so thank you again. Really appreciate it. And I wanted to have you on the show, obviously, to get kind of your viewpoint from outside, obviously, my ASU context, but kind of hear your feedback first on the cancellation of the season, right? What were your thoughts on that initial press conference and, the ongoing impacts for the rest of the year?
Yeah, mainly, I mean, like everybody else, it had to be sadness. I was very, very sad that it had happened. I'd kind of convinced myself that maybe they were going to hit pause instead of
Right.
cancel, and that maybe they could figure something out. I think this whole time I've just been sitting here hoping against hope that somebody would figure out something that would allow football to go on this fall.
Right.
And the closer we got to this week, the more it became clear that it just either not enough work had been done or we just still don't know enough to make that happen. And that's part of the sadness is that I agree with the decision. I don't think it's a bad decision. I think certainly hearing from USC's Clay Helton, from Mike Bone, the athletic director, from USC's the doctor Seth Gambrit, who was on
Oh, okay.
the medical the advisory committee. They had a press conference yesterday, and just hearing them talk about it, it was like, yeah,
Yeah.
they're really worried, they're really scared. And even the doctor said, I hope we're wrong about these heart problems, I hope we're wrong about all of these things, but we can't be certain that we are. And so there was an abundance of caution that I appreciate.
Right.
I think that we've seen from USC's players an appreciation of the approach that USC has taken.
Hmm.
Being in LA, it's a you have a unique perspective because the city has generally been taking this all very seriously from the beginning. It hasn't necessarily helped us all that much. We've had uh, our own spikes that have come forward.
Hmm.
There's been a lot of back and forth, but USC has always seemed to be very much on the side of caution around this. They have been um, very controlled and committed to the health and safety of the players, and I think we've seen that certainly. And they haven't really had very many positive tests, so
Good.
that's a good side for USC. The problem is that they are so uncertain about the potential health problems with the heart, with the
Right.
lungs, with the brain, all that kind of stuff, that they didn't want to take the chance. And that's been my feeling for the last few months. I can't fault anybody for an abundance of caution. I really can't.
Right.
And and one of the things that I've been saying for months now is I can't tell you what player on USC's team that I would be comfortable with having a serious health problem up to death
Right.
with this thing. And so, you know,
Hmm.
I get it. I totally get it. I'm very sad about it. I'm extremely disappointed.
Right.
I've been depressed all week, but the reality of the situation is there's too much we don't know, and I side with the with USC on that. So it's a sad time, but also a necessary time, if you ask me.
Absolutely. And that was, again, I think what a lot of people are beginning to gather based on how comprehensive the medical advisory board or whatever that was that the Pac-12 compiled, right? I understand that there was probably team doctors and then doctors from respective schools, but there was also the independent advisors. And so I'm still trying to gather some information on that. Did you hear or know where these independent advisors came from? Like, were they regional or were they national type of doctors, or what? Have you heard anything to that end?
All I've heard is that they're independent. I would imagine they might be regional, but at the same time, if it's not like they're getting together in person. They could have consulted with
Mm,
anybody around the country. I'm just not sure where they would have gathered those contacts.
right.
I would hope that it might be national, but at the same time, there's an argument for each regional footprint of the conferences. Maybe you are in the best consulting with people from your states. So,
Right.
the medical experts who maybe aren't associated with USC or UCLA, but
Hmm.
are in the Southern California area to speak to the challenges that Southern California is dealing with.
Okay.
Somebody from the Salt Lake City area or Utah as a state to speak to the challenges that that particular state is dealing with,
Right.
because all of these states are facing different challenges, even as we're confronting the same one. So I wouldn't I can't say that I know, but
Okay.
I would anticipate that most of those independent figures were probably within the footprint. I just have to guess.
And that's what kind of like, because I was trying to, so to that end, right? It was like what we've seen relative to all the other regions, right? We see the Big 12, we see the ACC, and we see SEC pushing forward, right? Where we got some. So I was just curious, right? Was it a similar approach by the Big Ten and the Pac-12 to have a similar advisory board, right? That was nationally based in a way, or is it more just like you said, regional? And so that's the one thing I've always been curious about to see, because it's always it appears how conferences are making decisions, if you will.
It's been fascinating watching this all play out because people are singing from totally different hymn sheets. Like, and I understand that there's a lot of disagreement on in broader society about coronavirus,
Right.
and certainly science is not a uniform. The scientific community is not a uniform community. There will be disagreements. I would be worried if there weren't disagreements, because different people are going to look at things from different perspective. But
Right.
I thought it was funny. I'm trying to think of it might have been a Bruce Feldman piece. Somebody wrote something with a source that was like, I don't know what they're looking at, because if they had looked at what we did, this is a Pac-12 source.
Yes.
I don't know how they were going forward, and so yeah, there's a disconnect there,
Hmm.
and I am so curious. Like, that's one of the curiosities I have is, will the SEC, the ACC, and the Big 12 actually move forward? Are they just delay?
Exactly.
Like, 2 weeks from now, are we going to be having a very different conversation?
Right.
I think that's entirely possible. At the same time, they could push forward, and it could turn out that the Pac-12 and the Big Ten were, I'm not going to say overly cautious, but
Hmm.
that maybe they didn't have to be this cautious,
Right.
and all of a sudden we're looking at football being played safely, and no one is damaged for it, and the
Exactly.
Pac-12 and the Big Ten are out. But like, the decision making process, the data that on August 10th or whenever day that they announced it, the data that everyone was looking at, either they're looking at completely different data or they are interpreting it
Yeah.
in completely different ways, and I can't square those holes or anything. It's it's so hard to, and I can't. wear it down to just they care about football more
Right.
because obviously I think they do. But it's more important. It just means more, as the SEC says.
Exactly.
But like from a medical perspective,
I
I
agree.
can't buy that medical professionals, that medical experts are swayed by the football of it all to the degree that
Right.
we'd have this major, massive split.
An incredible split. It's quite
Yeah,
it's quite divisive, right? It is a significant rift between significant conferences and everything else, and so it's kind of hard to really determine. And actually, one of the things that I saw, you may have seen it. It was the Oregon State athletic director. He used to be at LSU. I don't know if you saw that interview, but again, everyone, this is Alicia Artola. She is a USC writer, Penguin of Troy on Twitter, and we're just talking about, not only her impressions about the fallout of Pac-12 decision, but also the fans and feedback from USC. But this tweet I was talking about, also, if the if this dies, it's because my computer overheated because I'm in my garage, and so feel free to drop instead of just staring at the Zoom. So just remember that. So I've had technical difficulties. That's what I get for working in my garage. But that tweet that I saw was that the OSU Oregon State athletic director came from LSU, and he was saying that, you know, and it's to your point, right? What is he saying? And it's like, what is the Pac-12 saying that the SEC is not saying? And it's, in his opinion, it's like, well, if I had to, it's reality is what the Pac-12 is looking at, because there not only is there such a rabid fan base, but like you were saying, the schools are being, how do I say this? How did he say it in the article? There is a political influence to be able to push for the season. I guess not only because it is a way of life, but because it is such a massive moneymaker as well. So
and that's one of my worries is if this is financially motivated. I mean, that was one of the things I wrote on RadarTroy.com yesterday,
okay,
was having listened to Clay Helton and Mike Bone and the doctor who was made available, knowing that Mike Bone confirmed the report out of Utah. Their athletic department estimated they were going to have a loss of somewhere in the area of $50 to $60 million because they didn't have football this fall.
right.
And Mike Bone said that USC was going to be in the same kind of
Hmm.
range. And that is a that's a lot of money.
Yes,
You don't I tweeted this, you don't throw $50 million away for nothing.
right,
And so what I came away with was they can't have made this decision lightly. They can't have stood back and went, well, we're not sure, but uh, let's just do it because it's not going to matter. It
right.
does matter to all of these athletic departments
Absolutely.
massively. So if it's financially motivated in the SEC, for an example, where they certainly would lose more than 50 to 60 million because we know they make more money than the
Yeah,
Pac-12 does on the football
exactly.
side of things. So maybe it is financially motivated in that sense, but that that is problematic because
Yes.
the cost of the risk is I don't know, it just makes me feel a little dirty
In a way,
to
yeah.
have.
I think it's what you're
Yeah.
saying is that they're normalizing the death of a student for the game.
Or even just the potential not we don't even have to go to death, the myocarditis
Right. Okay.
issue. You're talking about um, athletes who maybe won't die but will certainly have uh, health problems that extend beyond the season,
Okay. Absolutely.
health concerns, and I guess the well-being of players. For me, it's the amateurism issue.
Right.
uh, I am uncomfortable with the idea of players who are not being compensated beyond
Hmm.
the scholarship being put in the position where they have to choose between their love of the game and the health and well-being of themselves and their families.
Right.
And like I'm perfectly fine with I think baseball is stupid for not going into a bubble, but those are professionals who
Exactly.
negotiated terms. And the student athletes involved in this are not professionals who are allowed to negotiate their terms.
Right.
So it doesn't feel right to me. Uh, I would feel
I
much more
agree.
comfortable if they acknowledge that these are not just amateurs; these are not just student athletes,
Yeah.
um, and 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 I would feel so much more comfortable because if they did that, they could go into a bubble. But right
Yes.
now, and the thing that one of the things that frustrated me so much and explained a lot to me early this week was Larry Scott saying that you can't have a bubble with college athletes. And I was like, yes, that is absolutely true. That is why you're not going to have a bubble, because you're worshiping in the altar at the altar of amateurism. But if you chose to give up amateurism, if you chose to sacrifice amateurism,
Right.
you could go into a bubble, you could
Hmm.
have college football, and you could do so very, very safely. In fact, you could do so you could keep the player, like the whole narrative about the players would be safer on campus thing. I think there is a certain amount of truth to that.
Yes.
But the fact is, if you just did a bubble, that would be the safest scenario for literally everyone involved. But
Absolutely.
you can't do that for a semi-political reason as well, which is on the other side of things, um, just as kind of dirty as the SEC going forward, because millions of dollars are at stake, and
Right.
the Pac-12 not going forward because they're not willing to give up this sort of mystical mythical label that they give to these students who happen to
Right.
play football.
Yeah, and that's in it's interesting point, right? And is it do you think doing a bubble at a football level is just more difficult? Because I don't know if you got to see that because I know you've been busy through the day, but I think it was Wilner that posted it early this morning about the Pac-12 college basketball coaches actually working with the conference and doing a bubble slash pod combo. If that makes so, what happens is that the USC, let's say the USC and UCLA men's and women's teams would travel to say Oregon, and then those four teams would play each other in a bubble sort of environment, right? So then you would have these pods kind of traveling together to kind of get to that point. So I wasn't sure, is it just easier at a basketball level than it would be a football level? Or is it still, like you
Uh,
said, because of the amateurism, is it still something that is not necessarily something that should be pursued?
I wonder if it's the time frame, because I think you could certainly do a bubble with like a tournament style bubble,
Hmm.
uh, with certainly less players involved. I still think that if you were going to put players in a bubble for any period of time, you would have to give them compensation, in my view. But I don't
Right.
know how the NCAA or the Pac-12 would sort of view that legally. But if you're talking about basketball where you do a pod, can you go in and out of a bubble? I guess, can you create temporary bubbles where you're doing um, the LA schools versus the Arizona schools,
Right.
and so you're putting them in a bubble for a week, where and then you're letting them out for
Exactly. That would be the plan.
weekend, or
Yeah, that
and
would be
and
the plan.
and so if you're going in and out of it, then you're not really restricting their freedom as far as seeing their family,
Right.
as far as interacting with anyone that they would interact with. Where on the football scale, um, the talk of a bubble was always sort of reserved for, you put them in a bubble for 3 months. Now, if you're going to
Yes.
ask somebody to be in a bubble for 3 months, you sure as hell have to pay them
Exactly.
hazard pay. Uh,
Absolutely.
and that's the other thing, is you're not just putting, what, a dozen players from each team in that bubble. You're putting 85 scholarship players. You're asking walk-ons
Yeah.
to potentially be in that bubble. Your staffs are bigger, all of that kind of stuff. The undertaking is certainly larger.
Right.
Even if you could wiggle your way, I think personally, I think the NCAA could wiggle their way into framing it in a way that they could get away with the amateurism in the bubble thing.
Hmm.
But doing so would, for football, would require a ton of effort, because you have
Absolutely.
to do it for hundreds of people, where you have to
Literally.
do it for dozens of people, and when you're dealing with basketball. So that would be my best guess for why that is. But like that, I hadn't seen that article from Wilner,
Okay.
so I think that's a really interesting way to do it, and that gives me that is a relief in some way, because at least somebody is
Yes.
thinking about this practically. At least somebody is acknowledging that this is the best way to go,
Right.
as opposed to just like, oh, you can just keep them on campus as though that's going to protect anybody. The kids have been on campus and they've been getting infected to begin with.
Right.
So, you know,
And that's the thing too. I think that's kind of reading all the forums and everything else and being on those various. There's a lot of people are jaded. A lot of people are very pessimistic. And one of that plan from the Pac-12, seeing that this morning, was the most positive thing that I had seen come out of the conference from a plan perspective in a very long time, right? Because it was always us, we'll see, we'll see, and then they finally canceled the season. But at least there's ideas trying to get worked out 4 months before this January 1st deadline happens, right? So at least there's talk and plans and everything else, and there's some organization that actually may work.
is that a reflection of how late they made this decision, though? Because now they're having to get real about what it'll take to have a basketball season. If they had maybe gotten real about the football season 3 months ago,
Right.
maybe we could be talking about temporary football bubbles too, where you do every other week, you hold all 6 games on one campus, you bring all of the athletes in,
Wow,
um,
that'd be cool though.
test them, you test them, they come into the bubble, they don't leave for the weekend,
Right.
and then you release them for a week off,
Hmm.
and then bring them back in for the next bubble. And I don't know how viable that is to get 10 games in under that sort of circumstance, but I'm sure that it could have been discussed. If this is what they're discussing on the
Exactly.
basketball side, it could have been discussed. But I think up until up until literally yesterday, I hadn't
Right.
heard the word bubble come out of anybody's mouth in the affirmative with any regard
Exactly.
to college football. So now it sounds like they're getting serious about it, and unfortunately they didn't get serious about it early enough to do this kind of thing with
Uh,
football.
Agreed. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that no one was really trying to get serious at any one point in time. And I just, the one thing that I get and that I haven't gotten an answer, but I think it's just as a fan, is what have they been doing in the meantime? It's, have they been, is it really that they're like, okay, we don't know what to do, but we're just trying to take a wait and see. And then all of a sudden, someone raised this flag of, hey, look at all this lingering effects someone's going to get. Oh, now we have to act. Or is it, like I was talking with someone on yesterday's, is someone waiting for the Avengers to swoop in because everyone's, it's just like, okay, let's just hope it works out, but there's really no plan to make it work out. So yeah, what were they doing? I wish I knew. I mean, I think that's a question all of us have had.
Absolutely. And that I'll give them a little bit of slack here, because so much of the first few months of this whole thing was no one
Mm,
knows anything. Uh, we want to
fair.
do testing this way and that way, but literally no one knew anything.
Right.
Down, from whether we're talking sports, whether we're talking government, whether we're talking societally, like the part of the problem with this whole pandemic has been the whiplash of this is what you should do or this is what you should do. Like
Right.
I was just talking to a family member. There was a time when they literally told us, "Don't wear a mask; it's pointless."
Yeah.
And now we're at a point where everyone understands, like, you have to wear a mask, it's
Hmm.
better than nothing. And then even just this week, I don't know if you saw the thing about the neck gaiters,
Yes.
might be counterproductive, it might be worse than not wearing a mask. And then
Right.
today I come onto Twitter and I see a rebuttal from somebody who was saying, like, that study wasn't really uh conclusive about whether or not, like,
And it
this
was a
that
type
they
of
didn't.
material and this, and
Yeah,
the
yeah,
sun
it's
is
all.
here, not over there.
Yeah, so am I allowed to wear a gaiter or not? Like, this is a question I now have that I
Right.
can't find a definitive answer for. So the lack of definitive answers certainly hasn't helped decision making processes,
Right.
because if you are an administrator in college football and you were sitting there going like, okay, so we understand we need to do this amount of testing.
Right.
Well, by September, are we going to have that amount of testing? Oh, we hope so. And then you get to now, and all of a sudden you're like, maybe not.
Right.
This isn't going to work.
We can't
I
guarantee
mean,
it. That's exactly what they said.
exactly, they can't guarantee it. And so I'm sympathetic in that front because I myself have sat here going like I don't know what to think. So the people who, I mean, granted they're getting paid millions and millions and millions of dollars to
Right.
figure it out, and I certainly wish that they would have. I Where I will fault them is, yes, we all didn't know, but when you don't know how something is going to play out, the logical thought would be, okay, in case of A, here's what we do. In case
Yes.
of B, here's what we do. In case of C, here's what we do. And that, unless something else comes out to clarify the situation, there is zero evidence that anyone had a plan B at any point over this whole
Yeah.
summer. I mean,
Exactly.
the Big Ten brought up spring football for the first time the eve of the weekend before they cancel the season.
Right.
You should have been having these conversations for months.
It's
So
yeah, it's interesting too because it's almost as if they just put up a guise when they knew they were going to make a different decision. Because I was kind of like professionally, I was in that position. We were we had so there's the annual registration for insurance, right? The open enrollment, and the date had passed, and we're like, hey, what's going on? So they kind of set something up as a whirlwind, and we all registered for insurance, and 3 weeks later the company got acquired. So so it's like, okay, that's why they didn't do it in November, that's why it was slapstick early December, because something was going to happen. And like you said, I think similar, they put something together just to appease everyone when they were actually really looking to make a different decision. They kind of
yeah,
already were leading towards it. So no, that's yeah. So everyone, thank you again. This is Alicia de Artola here from USC beat writer Penguin of Troy. Make sure you give her a follow. Again, I've always appreciated, admired, and loved her writing. So again, give her a shout out, follow her, and everything else, because we're just talking through um, the reaction as to what's going on from the USC side. And that was one of the points that you made. And I don't know if there's a link you can share. USC did have a press conference, it sounds like, yesterday, after I guess the Pac-12 came on. So it was Coach Helton, and it was the athletic director, and then I guess the medical advisor that was on there as well.
and two players. They ended
Oh,
up bringing
excellent.
in Keaton Slovis and Talanoa Hafanga
Okay.
to also address the media. So good on them for putting
Oh,
that together.
absolutely.
Um, and I think it was a really useful. The most useful bit of it was the questions that people were able to pepper the doctor with, because
Right.
he was going to be able to answer a lot more of the. I think Helton was answering more of the emotional kind of questions.
Right.
Bone
Okay.
was answering more of the sort of financial, practical kind of questions, and then the doctor was really able to nail down um, why they were so concerned about
Right.
the information they were getting on the medical side.
What was some of the questions and answers that struck you on that presser from the doctor specifically? And then we'll kind of get
Yes, I thought his best answer was he was sort of broadly asked, well, what changed? And he
yes, that's a
said that
good question.
the Pac-12 had gone into it expecting a couple of things. One, that the community spread, that the coronavirus in general would have decreased by now in society,
Okay.
because there was a moment early on when we sort of survived the initial spike, and then
Hmm.
things were declining
Right.
before the newer spike that came out. And so they were sort of setting up their plan based on, okay, the numbers are going to continue to diminish, and that it won't be totally gone by the time fall comes around, but it'll be less of a major societal concern.
Okay.
Obviously that changed
Right.
by this point. Now they looked at the rate of spread and the community cases,
Hmm.
and they were finding that in the footprint, certainly in California, in Arizona, and in some other places in the conference, that there were hotspots still very
Right.
active.
Exactly.
Um, the second thing that they assumed was that the virus was, and I'll use his word, relatively benign to the
Oh.
student athlete population.
Okay.
So they went in assuming that, like we all knew from the get go, this is very dangerous for older people and people with pre existing conditions.
Right.
But generally, younger people don't have much to fear here from their own
Right.
health perspective. And
They're not
and
dying,
that
so it's okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
younger people are extremely unlikely to die. Younger people are even unlikely to have a severe case.
Right.
They might pass it over like a minor flu, or might not even experience the symptoms at all.
Right.
And so that was the assumption that they were working on. And then that paper from Germany came out where they
Hmm.
found that it was something ridiculous, like 70% of people who had recovered from the coronavirus in that age group were showing the
I
signs
recall
of
that.
myocarditis.
Yes.
And then he specifically cited the Florida State former Florida State basketball player who died of a heart attack
Okay.
this past week.
Right.
Even though that hasn't been directly related to COVID-19, he certainly had it earlier this year. And then
Yes.
you don't have a heart attack as a healthy 27-year-old out of nowhere. That might have been just a coincidence, but you know,
Yeah.
you're not going overboard to say it might not have been a coincidence. They
It does.
also highlighted the what was he from? Um, Illinois or Indiana.
Hmm.
The his mother, the player whose mother posted on Facebook his struggles
Yes,
with
absolutely. I
with
can't
the
remember
with
from where, but right.
yeah. So they
Yeah.
specifically referenced him. So those cases plus the Big Ten myocarditis identifications
Hmm.
and the Florida State former basketball player and all of the data that was coming out that was showing that there are lung concerns, there are heart
Yeah.
concerns, there are brain concerns. They had to sort of backtrack on their assumption that this is a relatively benign um, concern for young people
Right.
and recognize that there are serious things to worry about for the health of people even in that 18 to
Of
24-year-old
course.
age range. And those were really the things that for them changed. I might argue that those things certainly could have changed many weeks ago.
Right. Fair.
The community spread thing, we've known this for over a month,
Yes.
that this was going trending in this direction. I can't say for certain when the medical data became uh, reliable enough to count on
Right.
the certainly we're only just hearing about the heart stuff. We've been hearing about the lung stuff for a little while longer, but
Right.
that stuff is certainly newer on the block. But I thought that his answer on that was pretty pretty effective in terms of we were making these two assumptions and they were totally undercut by the new data that we've been collecting. So um, maybe
That's
that's why you don't
interesting.
make assumptions.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that they were that there's a sort of a degree of influence that, okay, young people aren't dying, so we don't have to really worry about it as much. So, and we'll treat it as such, right? Whereas now we're really seeing, now that's where the whole argument, that's where the whole conversation now is. It's like, it only affects old people. It's like, nah, now it's about lingering effects. And I'm trying to figure out what the next thing is, right? Is it again just lingering effects? Or is it something else? And I don't know if it's because I think it may be reoccurrences. Like, let's say you got it and you survived and you fought it off, but then let's say it comes back again. And I know China is seeing that. I know New Zealand is seeing that. I don't know if any other countries are seeing that, but that second resurgence in someone's body, does it ravage them even more, even though they were able to survive it? What's that second? What's that second wave to that person going to do?
Right. And that's been one of the big questions we've had for since this whole thing began. Do you get immunity from having it? Like,
Right.
can you, uh, are you safe then once you've had it? And I have certainly not heard a definitive answer on that one way or the other.
Exactly.
And that would be the concern is that we don't know. We don't know. That's the Pac-12. The message that was coming out from USC side of it was basically ending every point on, but we don't
We
know,
don't
and
know.
that's what scares us. We don't know, and
Okay.
that's why we're concerned. We don't know, and that's why we're uncertain.
Right.
So you're right that you could have players who were totally fine this time, but you're putting them in a situation where maybe they are at greater risk next time,
Of
and
course.
now you're playing with the health and safety of players. My bigger concern, just personally,
Hmm.
that I think has been overlooked to a degree on the college football side of things, to the detriment of these discussions, is even if it is a relatively benign illness for young people, they can still carry it. And if we're not putting them in a bubble, then we are potentially exposing not just them, but their families and friends, and
Absolutely.
thus the larger community. If USC goes to Oregon State,
Hmm.
no, not that they were. Let's say USC goes to Oregon,
Hmm.
and one of their players unknowingly carries it, or one of their staffers unknowingly carries it into Otson
Right.
and infects an Oregon player. That Oregon player goes home because they're not in a bubble, and
And they didn't
sees
get
their
tested after a game, so they don't.
yes,
The assumption is that they're okay.
that they're fine.
Hmm.
Yes. And then they interact with their father, and their
Right.
father goes to work the next day and interacts with somebody, and all of a sudden you are reigniting potential community spread.
Yes.
So for me, it was never solely about fear for the play. I fully acknowledge that the
Of course.
players are certainly safer than a lot of blocks of the society given their age and their health. But it's my concern has been we don't just need to prevent this from spreading within college football. We need to prevent this from spreading within every city in America.
Yes.
And I don't think that college football helps the prevention of the broader spread of this thing,
Right.
if we're being honest. But I haven't really heard that brought up too many times. So,
Exactly. And no, I think it's a fair point. And Ray Anderson, ASU, had a presser after the announcement yesterday as well. And, that was one of the things that Ray Anderson, our athletic director, shared, is that, hey, you know what? It's not only, it's protecting the players, the coaches, and the families, right? Because it's not just everyone involved with the program, because everyone involved in the program extends beyond the immediate few people in the stadium or in the dorms, wherever else they are. And if they go ahead, then it continues to just spread out and out and out. Not necessarily that they're a super spreader, but it's still a matter of, look, you can get it to someone that can become that person, and then it just
mhm.
becomes even more. And I guess that was the biggest thing that I got taken away, right? Yes, of course there's lingering medical effects, but like you shared, it was the control. It was the, I don't want to say it's uncontrolled, but I guess it's wild community spread. Because I got in a back and forth with someone this morning about, people have been sacrificing, the numbers are going down, and I'm like, you know what, come and talk to me when it's hundreds per week instead of tens of thousands a week,
Yeah.
and then we'll talk about, we're controlling it by sacrifice, not necessarily it. And I think that's really, like you said, the biggest concern of, there's no guarantee everyone's being consistent. And I wish there was a conference standard that each school had to adhere to. But again, given the current state of society, it wasn't, no one did that, unfortunately. I think it would, I'm hoping that's what the SEC and the Big 12 and the ACC are doing, because I'd love to see them succeed. But I wish there was transparency with that. So then this way we could have some confidence. Say, okay, this might work.
Yeah, and that's the lack of transparency has been one of the concerning parts. But I mean, on the plus side, this might work out for the better. The seriousness with which the Pac-10 and the Big Ten, or the Pac-12 and the Big Ten, are taking this.
Right.
I saw was it Texas Tech, or one of the Big 12 teams was talking about how they're going to have players tested 3 times a week, and that they're going to have each player go through EKG and
Right.
MRIs and all
Yep.
that kind of stuff to make sure that they don't have the myocarditis concern and all of that kind of stuff. So maybe this spurs the schools that do want to move forward into having to take it more seriously on the health side, because
Exactly.
I saw somebody else tweet this, and I don't remember who it was, so I'm not going to be able to give them credit, but something about like, um, if something goes wrong in those for a program that decides to play, and a player ends up being dying or having serious health problems
Right.
in court, if there is a lawsuit or anything like that, the lawyer is going to be able to point to the Pac-12 and say, look, they were
Yeah.
too worried to go ahead with this, so you took this risk, and thus you're even more liable for it. So
Right.
uh,
I
I
do
think
remember
those,
that tweet. I can't remember it, but it was
yeah,
brilliant. Yeah, exactly.
yeah. So the schools that are going forward are going to have to be on their best behavior because they don't have the excuse of, well, no one saw this coming.
It's
Well, the
like,
Pac-12
no.
and the Big Ten did.
Yeah,
So
exactly. You don't have any fallback. And I think Big 12 had, like you said, the three tests a week and everything else, but it just doesn't feel frequent enough. But again, we'll
well
all
the
find out.
yeah, the Pac-12 said basically that they decided they needed to have daily testing, and that was
Hmm.
part of the reason why they're not going forward because that was not a doable thing at
Right.
this point for every team in the conference.
Now, is USC doing any tests for staff or students or, anything? I'm sorry, faculty or anything like that?
Well, so the USC campus is they've gone fully online
Okay.
as far as I know for the broader student body and faculty. USC's players are being tested. I think it's like once a week.
Hmm.
It might be twice a week. I know that we get the results. They announce it every Friday or Saturday.
Okay, cool.
So I think they're getting sort of tested like midweek, and then by Friday they know.
Got it.
Um, but even then, USC is doing it once a week, and the Pac-12 seems to agree that that's not often
It's
enough.
not often enough.
So it's even USC, who has tons of resources on that front,
Right.
still we're going to have to exponentially increase the the resources that they were pumping into making this whole
Exactly.
thing happen.
Because the reason I'm asking, right, is that, and that's kind of going to be a question for some of the other people I interview. ASU developed a saliva test that's able to detect COVID, and you can get a result in under 36 hours. It's free to all faculty and students. It's actually in the north side of the stadium. There's a drive-through. You drive up, you get your thing, you pull up, you spit in the vial, you hand it, you drive away, and then you get your results a little while. So I think it's probably that's kind of going to be the thing that students are going to have to do on a daily basis in order to start playing again. But I'm just trying to figure out how other schools are doing it. So it seems that they're doing their best, but to your point, it's not unified yet.
Yeah, and as far as I know, the test that they're doing at USC is sort of the more standard
Up the nose,
nasal
yes.
uh, up the nose thing. I
Have
know
you
that
done that?
I have not. I got tested, but it was the cheek swab,
Oh, did you? Okay, cool.
and yes, and that was in Los Angeles. They have free testing for pretty much anyone who asks
Okay.
for it. You just have to sit in line at Dodger Stadium for like 3 hours, but
Yeah,
there were worse things to happen.
exactly.
And yeah, that was just a very simple
Interesting. Okay.
cheek swab. And that it took probably 4 days to get the test back.
Wow.
Maybe it was 3 days.
Okay.
So it wasn't that long, but it was still long enough that
Long
like if
enough.
I had been positive, I would have been potentially exposed. Long. I mean, I stayed home for those days,
Yeah,
but
we were at home
not
anyway.
everyone. Yeah. But the concerning thing is that you can be uh, safe, you can be totally responsible and do everything that you need to do to prevent getting it, and all it takes is one person being irresponsible,
Exactly.
and then all of a sudden things are blown up, and
It,
that's the case on college camp. I mean, look at the MLB. These are professional athletes who
yes.
were extremely irresponsible for whatever moments that they were, and all of a sudden they lose most of their season.
They have lost weeks to play, right? And I think that's, again, the bubble is a testament, right? Because NBA and NHL are pulling it off. Um, NFL is not doing a bubble. It's kind of a pseudo bubble, I would
Yeah.
guess. So we'll see. Again, like you said, one slip up and it just goes ahead and it can run rampant. So that's the other thing. But I know we're coming up on our time, and I can't wait to have you back on the show. But Alicia, I really appreciate you coming on here. One last question: spring ball, in favor of or against?
1000% in favor of. I
Okay.
think all of the concerns about having two football seasons in a year are short-sighted or narrow-sighted. Um,
Okay.
I think that we're not talking about doing 24 games in a year. I think the best way to do this, you need to recoup some money from the
Hmm.
TV deals. You do want to give players a carrot to chase after this fall as far as the preparation and staying on board.
Okay.
So I would do spring football. Personally, I would do something like a divisional play only
Okay.
situation where you do 5 divisional games and then you play a 6 game.
Hmm.
Uh, you can have that be the conference title game alone, or
Right.
I was sort of throwing around the idea of doing almost like a bowl matchup within the conference.
Oh,
So
yes. Of course.
the
Yeah.
number ones in the South play each other, and the number twos in the South and North play each other, and then you finish out your season with 6 games that way.
Oh,
Which
okay.
you could, in theory, if you start early enough, you can end that season before April or in April.
Hmm.
Then you give yourself May, June, July, and I think I would say most of August to give the players off,
Right.
and then start your season almost along the lines of the plan that they already had in place for this year,
Right.
where you're starting your season in late September.
Hmm.
Do potentially a 10 game Pac-12 season. If you want to do non-conference games, I think you could sort of figure that out,
Right.
but then have your conference title game on the 12th or the 19th of December, like they were talking about for this year,
Hmm.
and then you get back to normal in 2022. I think that's all
Interesting.
very reasonable
I
and
like it.
doable. The hurdle is taking the time and effort to organize it.
Yeah.
You have to have schools and conferences that are willing to do the hard work that it'll take
Right.
to getting a spring season off the ground. And at this point, I don't know if the willingness is there, but I certainly hope it is, because I
Agreed.
can't stomach the thought of another year of no Pac-12 football. So
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a brilliant idea. I really like that approach. I don't look forward to having my team play in either the Washington or Oregon schools, or even Colorado or Utah during, the spring. But I think it would be interesting, like you're saying, like a bowl approach, where you could have technically 4 games in the southern part of the Pac-12. It would just be a matter of finding where those other two are going to be hosted. Watch it be
right.
just my luck that ASU would have to play Wazoo and Pullman in February. So,
Yeah.
but yes, but thank you again so much. Shout out to Fred S. He said fight on, Penguin of Troy. So
Oh,
again, you got some
right on.
fans out there, exactly. But thank you again so much. Really looking forward to having you back on the show. Anything you want to plug? Anything you're doing, podcasts or anything else like that?
Oh, I mean, thank you also for having me on. It's been very, very fun.
Good.
People can find me on Twitter at Penguin of Troy. They can find the website at Reign of Troy, reignoftroy.com. We have obviously the podcast that we do every week. We also have a Patreon, so that's patreon.com/, Reign of Troy, if you want bonus episodes or anything like that on the USC side. But really, I would encourage, even ASU fans or any other Pac-12 fans that are out there, check us out. One of my greatest compliments that I receive uh, from time to time is from fans of other schools who listen to the show, because they appreciate the sort of approach that we have, where we're fans, we care, but we're measured. We're not homers, or we try not to be, and yeah, we just try to tell it like it is. So
I think
yeah,
that's.
check us out.
I'm looking forward to that. I'll add you to my rotation. I think as Pac-12 fans, I think we're much more measured, and we're able to look at the conference a little bit more instead of some other ones. I haven't interacted with too many fans with other conferences, but I think like yours, like Podcast of Champions, like Pac-12
Mhm.
Apostles, all of those podcasts, we're able to give a good look, even though we're fans of our schools. We can give a good look at the conference level as well. So I can't wait to give that a listen. But again, thank you, Alicia. Really appreciate you. I hope, survive Phoenix, drink a lot of water. I am glad you're coming back home to the great state of California this weekend. It's always good to cross the Colorado back end, because even if it is Blythe, it's still home.
Oh, good old Blythe.
Exactly, exactly. So yes, so thanks again, Alicia. Have a great evening. Everyone else on the chat and on the stream, thank you. As always, subscribe and follow on Twitter, Instagram, and on YouTube. So again, thank you so